It all began with the piercing wail of sirens, not the distant hum of trouble, but the kind that hits you like a punch to the gut when they grind to a halt right outside your house. I stepped out of my barn, a basket of freshly collected eggs still cradled in my arms, just as a black and white police cruiser pulled up to my driveway. My neighbor, Linda, stood on the sidewalk, arms folded tightly across her chest, her lips curled into a smug grin that threatened to split her face in half. She wore that victorious, holier-than-thou expression, certain she'd finally gotten the upper hand. I sighed, running a hand along the back of my neck. What now? I mumbled to myself. This wasn't Linda's first rodeo trying to get my little farm shut down. Ever since she'd clawed her way to the top of the HOA, she'd turned her reign into a personal crusade against me. My chickens were too noisy, my vegetable patch was an eyesore, and my roadside stand, where I sold eggs and fresh produce, was, in her mind, some kind of underground crime ring. She'd lodged more complaints than I could keep track of, none of them sticking, but this time, she'd upped the ante. The cruiser's driver's side door creaked open, and out stepped Officer Tom, a burly guy in his 40s with a mustache so bushy it could have doubled as a broom. His sunglasses masked his eyes, but the casual way he hitched up his belt told me this wasn't a high-stakes visit. Linda, though, was practically buzzing with glee. "Officer, I caught him in the act, selling unregulated goods right here in our quiet little neighborhood. It's a health hazard. He's probably spreading germs left and right. I insist you shut this illegal racket down now," she declared, her tone dripping with the melodrama of a bad TV lawyer. I bit back a laugh. Linda always acted like she was auditioning for a starring role in her own courtroom saga. Tom slid off his sunglasses and glanced my way, then let out a quick, surprised chuckle. "Hey, Mike," he said with a nod. I nodded back. "Hey, Tom." Linda blinked, thrown off by the easy familiarity. "Wait, you know him?" she stammered. Tom scratched his head. "Yeah, I buy my eggs from him every week." Linda's jaw dropped, her brain visibly fritzing as her righteous indignation fizzled out like a wet firecracker. She opened her mouth, shut it, opened it again. No sound came out. If I'd had my phone handy, I'd have filmed the whole thing for laughs later. Tom, unfazed, strolled over and peeked into my basket. "Got any of those brown eggs today? My wife swears they taste better." Grinning, I handed him one. "Fresh this morning." Linda's stunned silence shattered as she flailed her arms like a wind-up toy gone haywire. "This is outrageous. He's running an unauthorized business in a residential zone." Tom sighed and turned to her. "Ma'am, first off, Mike's place isn't under HOA control." Linda's eyes twitched. But it's dragging down property values." Tom tilted his head. "Is it? I see a tidy farm, healthy animals, and folks who like his stuff. Doesn't look like a problem to me." Linda's breath hitched, like she'd been personally stabbed in the back. "What about the health risks? You don't know what kind of filth is festering here." Tom glanced at me, shaking his head. "Linda, do you think I'd buy from him if it wasn't safe? His farm's cleaner than some diners I've checked out." Linda's frustration hit a boiling point. She looked ready to hurl something. "You're obviously biased. This is why I had to call the police myself. If you won't handle this, I'll take it to the county." I crossed my arms, watching her unravel. "Linda, if my farm's such a nightmare, why do half the folks around here buy my eggs and veggies?" Her face flushed crimson. "They're clueless. They don't see the damage you're doing." Tom chuckled. "Or maybe they just like good food." Linda let out a low growl, jabbed a shaky finger at me, and spat. "This isn't over. I'll find a way to end you." I shrugged. "Good luck with that." With a furious huff, she spun around and stomped off, muttering about lawsuits and zoning codes. I resisted the urge to wave. Tom sighed, rubbing his temple. "She's really got it out for you, huh?" I smirked. "Out to make my life hell, yeah." He tucked the egg in his pocket and tipped his head. "If she actually gets anywhere with her crazy, let me know. Far as I'm concerned, you're in the clear." I laughed. "Thanks, Tom." He climbed back into his cruiser and drove off, leaving me standing there with my eggs, shaking my head. I knew this wasn't the end. Linda didn't take losing lightly. She'd be back with something nastier. But I wasn't about to let her win without a fight. The air hung heavy with that thick, butter-knife tension the next morning. Linda had stormed off after her failed cop stunt, but I wasn't naive enough to think she'd quit. Sure enough, as I was feeding my chickens, I spotted her pacing along my fence, phone clutched tight, lips pursed so hard they might have fused shut. She saw me, and without hesitation, marched toward my driveway, her heels clicking like a countdown to chaos. Her face was a mask of barely contained fury, the kind that screamed she'd spent all night plotting her next move. "Hope you're ready," she said, her voice syrupy with venom. I leaned on my rake, keeping it cool. "Ready for what, Linda? Another show?" She ignored the dig. "I've contacted the county inspector. He's coming today. You won't sweet-talk your way out of this one." I raised an eyebrow, feigning awe. "County inspector? Wow, you're really scraping the barrel now." Her eye twitched. "This isn't desperation, it's justice. You've been running an illegal operation, and I'm going to prove it." I sighed, setting the rake aside. "Linda, for the last time, my farm's legit. I've got the papers to back it up." She smirked. "Then you won't mind an inspection, will you?" I didn't have time for her games, but if an inspector was on the way, I'd be ready. My farm was spotless. I wasn't worried. Still, I went through the checklist: livestock records, clean produce stand, a heads up to a few customers. By noon, a white county truck rolled up, and out stepped a guy in his late 40s with a blank, seen-it-all stare. His name tag read Inspector Harris. Linda practically pounced on him. "Inspector, thank you for coming on short notice. I've got proof this man's breaking every health and zoning rule in the book," she crowed, flinging a dramatic hand my way. Harris barely flicked his eyes at her before turning to me. "You the owner?" I nodded. "Yeah, Mike Taylor." He pulled out a clipboard and adjusted his glasses. "All right, let's see it." I gave him the full tour, pointing out every detail that debunked Linda's wild claims. He checked the chicken coop for crowding and cleanliness, scribbled notes on my garden, asked about composting, even poked around my shed to confirm everything was up to code. Linda trailed us like a wannabe detective, muttering over-the-top accusations. "Look at that dirty wheelbarrow. Contamination central. Those tomatoes, probably drenched in toxic pesticides. And the chickens, nonstop noise, they're clearly miserable." Harris ignored her, jotting notes. After an hour, he snapped his clipboard shut and faced me. "Looks solid. Farm's well kept, records are good, animals are healthy. No violations here." Linda's face turned a violent shade of red. "What? That's impossible. Did you even look properly? There's got to be something." Harris adjusted his glasses, giving her a weary look. "Ma'am, I've been at this for 20 years. I know a good farm when I see one. No health risks, no zoning issues, nothing illegal." She floundered, grasping at straws. But the smell? You can't say this place doesn't stink up the whole street." Harris sighed. "It smells like a farm. That's not a violation." I could almost hear the gears grinding to a halt in her head as she realized she'd struck out again. But Linda didn't do graceful exits. "This isn't over," she hissed. "There's something here. I'll find it." She spun around and stormed off, muttering about more complaints. I exhaled, shaking my head. Harris chuckled, tucking his clipboard under his arm. "She's relentless, huh?" "You have no idea," I said. He patted his truck. "If she calls again, I'll tell her to quit wasting our time." "You're good. Keep it up." I thanked him as he drove off. Relief should have hit, but I knew Linda too well. She wasn't done after one flop. And I was right. 2 days later, a notice was taped to my mailbox. An HOA letter claiming my farm was a community nuisance and announcing a petition to force me out. I snorted. Relocate? To Mars? Linda was throwing everything at the wall, hoping something stuck. But she didn't get it. Most folks here liked my farm, the eggs, the veggies, the vibe it brought. She might have swayed a few grumps, but she was about to learn how little pull she really had. Instead of freaking out, I fought back. I called my best customers, local shop owners, regulars, and asked them to spread the word about Linda's stunt. Within hours, the town was buzzing. The next morning, when Linda strutted to the community center with her petition, expecting a flood of signatures, she froze. Someone had started a counter-petition to boot her as HOA president, and it was already outpacing hers. I watched from afar, arms crossed. As she yanked the paper down and scanned the names, her smug mask cracking. She whirled around, eyes darting, landing on me. "This isn't fair," she snapped. I smiled. "Neither's trying to kill a farm that feeds people." She gripped the petition, knuckles white. But for once, she was speechless. I turned and walked off, whistling. The fight wasn't done, but the momentum had shifted. Linda was finally seeing she wasn't the neighborhood's dictator. Even after the inspector flop and the counterpetition gaining steam, Linda wouldn't wave the white flag. For a few days, she strutted around like nothing had changed, nose sky high, acting untouchable. But the cracks were showing. Word of the petition spread like wildfire, and more names piled onto the list. Some were just sick of her constant whining. Others genuinely valued my farm and hated her vendetta. Either way, she was losing ground fast. That didn't stop her scheming, though. I was fixing my produce stand when an unfamiliar car rolled up. Out stepped a suit-clad guy with a folder, looking like he'd rather be anywhere but here. Linda trailed him, beaming with smug triumph. "This," she proclaimed, gesturing grandly, "is Mr. Carter from the zoning board. He's here to check if your farm violates property rules." I wiped my hands on my jeans, unimpressed. "Zoning board, huh? You don't give up, do you?" She smirked. "Unlike you, I care about the rules." Carter cleared his throat. "I'm here to review zoning classifications for compliance. If there's a violation, you might have to cease operations." I nodded, calm as ever. "Go ahead, look around." I had nothing to hide. My farm predated the HOA, and I knew the laws cold. Still, I humored Carter, answering his questions, showing permits. Linda hovered, eagle-eyed, praying for a slip-up. But as the inspection dragged on, her smirk faded. Carter spent an hour pacing the property, checking maps, grilling me on regulations. When he finished, he flipped through his folder, double-checked, then turned to Linda. "This farm's zoned for agricultural use and meets all ordinances. No violations." Linda's smile locked up. "Excuse me." Carter adjusted his tie. "It's grandfathered under an AG exemption. Mr. Taylor can run his farm here, no problem, as long as he follows guidelines, which he does." Linda's jaw tightened like it might crack. "That's not right. There's got to be a mistake. He's got a business in a residential zone." Carter sighed, done with her. "Ma'am, I get your concerns, but this is settled. No issues." I bit my cheek to stifle a laugh as Linda's face cycled through red shades. She sputtered, wordless for once, beautifully speechless. Carter nodded at me. "Mr. Taylor, thanks for your time. Call if you need zoning docs." I grinned. "Will do." He left without waiting for Linda's comeback. She snapped out of her daze, fists clenched. "This isn't over." I raised an eyebrow. "Linda, I hate to break it to you, but it kind of is. Cops. Nada. Inspector? Clean bill. Zoning? Cleared. Maybe take the L." Her eyes blazed, but she had no retort. She stormed off, heels pounding the pavement. A few days later, her fate was sealed. The counterpetition snowballed, forcing an HOA meeting. Half the neighborhood showed, ready to end Linda's tyranny. She tried defending herself, property values, community good, victim card, but no one bit. People aired her dirty laundry, petty harassment, wasted resources, stress. The vote wasn't close. Linda was out as president. I wasn't there for her exit, but word was she stormed off, cursing, avoiding eyes. Some said she'd move, but I doubted it. She'd rather stew. Still, she'd lost, and that was enough. The next morning, I opened my stand, savoring the quiet. Neighbors stopped by, congratulating me, grabbing eggs and veggies. Even ex-HOA folks, free from Linda's grip, swung by. As I was wrapping up, Tom's cruiser rolled in. He tipped his hat, grinning. "Guess I won't be getting more nuisance calls about you." I laughed. "Looks like it." He leaned on his car. "Never thought I'd see Linda go down. She's been a terror forever." "Watching her crash? Priceless." I smirked. "Glad I don't have to dodge surprise visits anymore." He pulled out cash. "Got those brown eggs? Wife'll kill me if I come home empty-handed." I handed him a carton, shaking my head. "You're keeping me afloat, man." He grinned. "Gotta back the local guy." As he drove off, I leaned on my stand, breathing deep. The farm stood strong, Linda was powerless, and life was good, better than good. Peaceful. Home at last.